All right, we're going to welcome Dave Mattson to the stage. Dave, welcome. Dave Mattson is our president and CEO. He's talking about technology in a shifting landscape and trying to keep us up to date with all of the crazy stuff that's been happening this year. It's a tough challenge, Dave, but we're excited to hear what you have to say. Take it away.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Emily. Hey, group. First of all, thank you for spending the afternoon with us, or the day. I want to kind of set the stage for my presentation, because it's really the beginning of what you're going to see throughout the day from the other presenters. I'm going to share some insights with you. As Mike said, we work with 50,000 people a year. And as you can imagine, that means that we have insight into lots of different size companies, lots of different size of sales cycles, what they sell. And I know that they come to us because we have actionable tactics and strategies. But in fairness, we learn so much from our clients, probably as much as they learn from us. We see best practices. We see things that you should be doing. We see things that you shouldn't be doing. And we've made some observations that I'm going to share with you today, 3 big ones with some subsets. The reason for that is that it'll set the stage for the other presenters, because they're going to talk about one of those insights in depth. So there'll be a touch of overlap, but really it's because I want you at the end of the day to see a topic from different perspectives, so you'll have a 360 view of what's going on. So let's share some of the things that we're seeing. First of all, as Mike said, there is a ton of change going on in the marketplace. It's overwhelming. You know, I've been doing this now for 37 years, and every time there's a huge shift in the market or huge shift in technology, I say, well, wow, you know, what else could come? But it's coming at such speed these days. If you think about any of these things that you see on your screen, you may be experiencing rapid change in one or more of these. I mean, technology. As of COVID, you know, when you have a pandemic, acceleration, not innovation, is what occurs. And in acceleration, we can't say anything other than that when it comes to technology. The speed by which technology is coming in the performance space is unbelievable. Because of that, the buyer journey is changing as well. You know, how we bought yesterday doesn't necessarily mean, and it's not going to be, how the buyers are buying in tomorrow's environment. With that, though, you've got skill gaps. We're going to spend some time on that. Skill gaps to me mean, you know, there's a huge gap between the skills that your current sales force has now and what's needed in the future, right? So, you know, what we did in the past isn't necessarily going to mean that's the road of success in the future. So that gap between what we have now and what we're going to need is widening very, very quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Listen, the remote thing is here to stay. It's not changing. Well, we've got 2 different sides of that. I've got a remote sales force, right? From a manager's perspective, that gives me some challenges, but also from a buying perspective, that's changed as well. And we'll talk a little bit about why that is in a couple minutes. But even the economy, if you think about the economy, you know, that has slowed down decisions for some. I mean, again, some of these are situational. But you'll find that it costs more money. And when things cost more money, people are a little more conservative in their decision process. And so you're going to see a lot of things that pop up, and these changes are happening rapidly. And there's other things that are going on in the marketplace. Listen, you're going to see all these studies now coming out. And this one, there's 2 that I'm going to share with you that caught my eye. One is the 72% of B2B buyers say they would rather have a rep-free experience. I mean, think about that. We're all in sales and sales leadership. That means 72% of the buyers, including yourselves, would rather have a rep-free experience. Now, I say to myself, is that really true? I mean, could it be? And maybe, but if you really think about it, we all buy without salespeople these days. And it's not because I hope that we don't provide value. It's just because Amazon and others have taught us that we can do an awful lot before we engage in a salesperson. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But, you know, if people always say to me, David, is sales a science or is it an art form? And in my mind, it's a science performed by artists. And so if you really think about all the things that are changing out there, and I'll even go right to the decision process that's changing, because we've all seen the studies, how it's becoming way more complex in today's environment than it ever was in the past, right? Certainly, I know that's true for my world. And we can argue whether there's 12 points in the decision process now or 18. You know, people call me and said, I found out there's 2 more spots in the decision process that we really should focus in on. And that's probably true, and it'll probably grow to some other big number at some point in the future. But why is that happening? Why is it becoming more complex? Well, if I go back to some of the things that I've already talked about early on with these changes in the environment, I mean, if you really think about it, the economy has caused us to have more conservative decision processes, right? We want to make sure we're making the right decision. Most of us, our competition isn't the company that we normally fight against. Of course, that's always happening. It's indecision. It's deals getting pushed. So it's there. But I also think that the remote factors had a tremendous input into the decision process. Why? Well, if we go back a little bit, if I was on a committee and we were looking at 4 different options, 4 different vendors, let's say, I would have to go watch 4 presentations. Now I'm on the East Coast. Let's pretend for a second that my home office was on the West Coast. I work for a technology company. That's probably accurate. I would have to, in the old days, get on a plane, take a day to get there. There's 4 presentations. Chances are there's 2 each day. And then we're going to talk about it, and then I come back. So in essence, I have invested 4 to 5 days in order to make that single decision with my fellow committee members. Fast forward, everybody's remote. I can do the same thing now in 4 hours. I can jump onto the 1-hour presentation that they're making. I don't have to fly across anywhere to see it. And because in the old days, I probably wouldn't participate as an individual committee member. What I would probably say at some point, right, because I still have to, if you're let's say you're a sales leader and you're on this committee, I still have to hit my number in my local marketplace. I probably would say at some point, you guys can make that decision. You know where I stand, right? I think we've gotten to this point. Just pick the best solution based on everything that we've talked about it as a group. I trust you. Now, we all know that goes horribly wrong sometimes at the end because I didn't like their decision, but that's a whole different program. But it happens. So because now that we're remote, it's much easier. And what we're going to find is AI is going to change a lot of these things. We're going to talk about that in a second. But I also think that organizations in today's environment are making more of an enterprise decision, which means a company-wide decision. So many times, organizations, regardless of what you sell, if you could sell into multiple parts of the organization, you were making individual sales to divisions, to groups, to leaders. Now what's happening over the last year and a half is that organizations are trying to make a system-wide decision. Less is more. How do we leverage all of our partners, our suppliers, to make sure that we're having consistency across the format? That's kind of easy if you really think about technology for a second. You know, even in our organization, and we don't have 20,000 employees, and we have lots of employees, but not 20,000. There is hundreds of thousands of dollars of overlap in technology spend. Why? Because every individual manager was buying technology, and you had 4 or 5 different pieces of technology that did the same thing. And that's insane. So now we've even said, you can't do that. If you need a particular piece of software, then let's figure out what it's for. Do we already have it? If we don't, we're buying one for everybody. And I just think that's the way it's happening, and it's probably the same for you. So let's talk about this for a second. What are some of the observations that we've made based on, again, working with the 50,000 people? Look, first one, and again, this fits into our challenges, but in today's complex buyer journey, along with the landscape, right, it's going to require a new breed of salespeople. It's really going to. What we're doing today to sell today isn't really what we're going to be doing in a year, 2 years, 3 years from now. It'll change dramatically. What are all those changes? Who really knows? But it is changing. It is changing. That doesn't mean that we can't make that shift. That just means that we have to be consciously aware there is a shift. There is a shift, right? I mean, some people held on to, we're not going to be remote for a while. Everybody knows it's not going away. So I just use that as a past experience, but it's true with a lot of future forward stuff as well. So underneath that, we have some further thoughts. Skill gaps are becoming wider and wider. What does that mean? In a given organization, I am really focused on the skills that it takes me, my people, to succeed today. But with the shifting landscape, the buyer journey's changed. Technology has changed the way people buy, the way that people sell. Again, if we just say that tomorrow's seller is going to need something else, the gap between what we're doing today and what we're doing tomorrow is widening faster and faster. The insight of course, is organizations are doing a very poor job hiring to the salesperson of tomorrow, onboarding with the skills, the experiences necessary to succeed for tomorrow, in addition to today, but also developing our people, right? We're so focused on, we've got to make sure we do well today, which, by the way, we do too. But again, you can't lose sight of what's happening in the future. Another insight was data-driven insights, right? Data-driven assessments will shape, it will shape how we hire, how we develop, and how we coach tomorrow's seller. And I'm going to peel back that onion in a second, but super important. The last one, I've been saying this for years, but it's even more important now. And we're going to touch base again in about a minute and a half on this topic, which is in today's environment, with that complex buying process that you just saw, the need for constant tools, consistent tools across my thing, consistent sales process within all of the people who touch my prospects, my buyers, my customers, and methodology that's consistently used across the board is even more important now than it's ever been in the past. So those are some of the big picture stuff. Now, our speakers are going to dive into some of these, in addition to some of the other things that I'll be sharing with you. So again, I'm going to set the framework. I'll stay at about 25,000 feet. Michael's going to dig into about 5,000 feet in a couple seconds on a topic that I'll talk to you about in a second. But let's talk about the data-driven assessments as an example. Look, assessments in general, I'm pro-assessment. You know, everyone has an assessment. There's millions out there. And I'm not going to say Sandler's assessment's better than others. It is, but this is not the program. The issue is this, that most organizations have assessed when an employee is looking to be hired, right? Do they fit into my team? Do they have the skills necessary to succeed in my environment? That's what we're looking for. We don't want to onboard and take, all the time and energy if they're not fitting my team, my environment, my sales environment. So I'm suggesting to you the following. You need to assess your teams right now. Just assessing when people are hired and using it as a development tool. But we all know that that's used for a very short amount of time and we never go back and look at it. Every time I'll do a behavioral assessment as an example, which is much different than a competency or skill-based assessment. People said, oh yeah, I took that 15 years ago. I've got to go dust that off. That's just an indication that people aren't using it, right? So here's my thing. Assess where we are today. And you have the ability to do two things. One is that team assessment are things that you could be working on as an organization to say, yes, I've got to strengthen what's happening with my current team, but I also know that I've got to shift my team into that tomorrow's environment. Now, there's another piece which most organizations don't do. We focus on the team assessment. I'm suggesting that you also spend more time on the individual, because if you think about it as a leader, we manage, right? We manage individuals. And I always hear people say, well, I manage a team. You do, but a team, you're really managing a group of individuals that make up a team. So we manage teams. What does that mean? Well, if you really think about that for a second, I have to look at each individual and say, okay, what can I do to increase that skill level for today? But again, future forward, what can I do to this individual, with this individual, to develop their performance that they will be ready to thrive in tomorrow's environment? And that's the key. And AI has allowed us to do that. AI is actually, with the technology of today, has actually allowed us to go one step further, which is, if you create a success profile of what you believe the skills are, the habits, the experiences, Mike talked about the mindset and the behaviors that are going to be necessary to thrive for tomorrow's seller, that success profile, now you can hire, you can onboard, you can coach to that profile in addition to filling the gaps. So AI has now said, okay, I take the assessment and the technology automatically assigns me a learning path as an individual. Now then you say, well, okay, well, who cares about that? And that may be true, but look at it from this perspective. In the old days, we would take an assessment and the team would go through some sort of development, right? And so if I was a sales leader, I would say, I know my team. We need closing, we need qualifying, we need presentation skills. Okay, you have your internal team or an external team, work on those skills. That's great. But what happens about me over here as Mary single producer that I have a problem with call reluctance? How is that actually solving it for me? It's not. It's not. And if you have 10 people, There are huge gaps when each individual, if you put those together, collectively, we got a lot of gaps, right? As far as what you're doing from a team perspective and what I need as an individual. You compound that problem with, that's only for today's skills. What happens when we start building for people for tomorrow? It just gets more and more complex. So baseline. Second thing, ask yourself, have I created a success profile of tomorrow, right? Have I done that? And have I actually helped my individuals much better in a performance perspective, increase their skill level in addition to my team? Most people focus on team, forget the individual. Let's go back to something else we've talked about, this complex decision process. You know, I talked about consistent tools, consistent approach is so important. Buyers are buying in teams. Sellers, we need to sell in teams, right? It's just happening. There are so many different people involved in generating revenue, keeping revenue in our organization. You can see from this visual, I may have a BDR who gets the appointments, qualifies, and now I got an AE involved. Maybe here comes an enterprise. If you have specialties within your organization, you have product managers. They're coming in on the sales process because they want to offer credibility, right? And tell third-party stories and all the good things that we all know. Well, you're going to have account managers. You're going to have customer success people. You have sales leaders involved. You may have a channel. And that's that whole complexity just right on top of that. You have a lot of different people. And in the old days, meaning 6 months ago, it didn't matter as much that everybody was using different tools and different approaches. But because that buying process is becoming so holistic now, think about this. The BDR has one talk track and they're trained differently. AEs, they have something different, right? And so does a sales manager, maybe even an account manager. But from a buying perspective, I've got the people from the same company saying different things or saying the same thing, but they're not adding any value. I'll give you a quick example. I have 5 kids. One of them is a BDR, right? I know it's shocking. I've got some salespeople. So one's a BDR. Now, he's a rock star. Why is he a rock star? He's got about 1,200% more behavior and activity than everyone else. Put that aside for a second, because that's really, that's not why they consider him a rock star. Here's why. The handoff between one group and another, he's a BDR. So he has a handoff. He actually hands it off in written form to the AE. Just doesn't say, here's the appointment. He says, here's what we talked about. Here are the pain points. Here's what they're expecting on the next call. Here's some questions that I did not ask that you may want to ask. The AEs are shocked. Then he jumps on the call and says, hey, thanks for jumping on today. I just want to kind of level set this prospect. I know we talked about the following 3 or 4 things. You also had a couple questions that you were hoping going to be answered today. Those questions were this. Did I leave anything out? No, that was great. So in the next 45 minutes, do we still have 45 minutes? Yep. So seller, you know, you've heard some of the issues that I've shared with you ahead of time, but certainly Mary has validated those. But you also had some questions that I didn't have the answer to. I think maybe a good way to start for today is you get to ask the questions directly to Mary, and that way you guys can level set and have a productive conversation. Does that make sense? Yeah, I've set up my seller in an ability to ask questions, and he bails. Love him. The question is, why would they love him for that? We should be doing that all the time. That should be like just standard operating procedures. But I can tell you the handoff from one group to the other is horrific. And if your team says they do it, and I'm sure they do, but most of the time it's based on product knowledge. This is what they need product-wise. Here's what their specifications are. Bum, bum, bum. They don't deal with. Here are the pains they're trying to solve, right? Here are the questions that they would like to have asked. Here's the questions I didn't ask. All that's missed. So really think about, are you doing proper handoffs? Are you having common process? Process is different than methodology and tools. So you have a single, unified, right, approach to your buyers. Look, most of our buyers don't know your products as well as you do. And I know they can go and get PhDs on Google. I get it. And I do the same thing. But the fact of the matter is they're buying you. And if we're unified and if we're buttoned up, they expect our product or service to be buttoned up. If you're not buttoned up, don't expect your product or service to be buttoned up. And you're going to get hammered on price. So think about that for a second. Now, let me go back to a different statistic. 72% of the people said they don't even want to talk to salespeople. 68% say, well, I'll wait until the very last step of my buyer journey. Think about that for a second. I don't want to, but if I have to, I'll do it at the very end. And that statistic is horrific if you think about it. But then I sat back and I said, well, what do I do? For crying out loud, I'm in the performance industry, right? I actually respond to salespeople pinging me on LinkedIn. So I respect salespeople, but I'm probably in the same boat. And I thought about, why is that? I mean, I just bought a car online. I've bought a house that I saw once. I did everything online because Amazon has taught me, really, that I can do a lot of research. And technology has allowed me to do that. But I'm doing it at 2 o'clock in the morning. See, I'm researching my stuff, my personal stuff, in the middle of the night or early mornings, because I don't want to waste my pay time doing that. So I'm doing it all. And then when I get to the point where like, okay, I think I know what I'm doing, I'm now going to engage a salesperson. It's the only reason why. And I would have to say I'm not unusual. But this slide says something else too. It talks about the buyer journey. So here's what I would suggest to you. You have to know the buyer journey. Listen, we know there's 4 macro steps to buyer journey, right? You've got engagement, you've got consideration, you've got decision, you've got advocacy. But what do those steps mean for your buyer, your persona? You have to sit back and level set. Remember what I said. Today's seller is not going to be the same as tomorrow's seller. Today's buyer journey is not the same. Most people talk about buyer journeys, but they don't really understand what their buyers are doing in each one of these stages. And without that, you're flying blind. You got a good talk track, but you got good sizzle, but you have no steak, as they say. You can't back it up. So in our world, like here at Sandler, we use technology to map all of our content, our drips, our sales enablement stuff, where the buyer needs it based on where they are in the buyer journey. It's mapped together based on technology. It's a complete disconnect. If you're giving them advocacy notes because you want them to think like buyers, when they're over here in the consideration phase, they're not ready for that. So map your skill set. Listen, buyers, right, and sellers, we have different gigs. Sellers get paid for, if you think about it, sellers get paid to be agile. We get paid to sell the way buyers want to buy. That doesn't mean you're going to let them lead the dance, but buyers don't get paid to change the way they buy to accommodate you. And that's the point. So understand where we are and what we have to do. So here's another point of view that's really going to really dig deep with both Michael's presentation and then we had Jared's presentation. Jared, listen, it's going to be great because here's why. We're going to dig deep in what Jordan's doing as well. Look at this one. Technology and sales need to work in conjunction as one in order for the survivability of your organization, your sales organization. What does that mean? If they're not embracing technology, our sales organization are going to be dinosaurs. That is just the way it is. Now, we can say that's not true. It is true. It is changing dramatically. You know, I was on the call yesterday and somebody says, well, Dave, I've got retrieval, augmented, generated AI. I'm like, where did that phrase come from? It's popping up so much. If we sit back, we know that AI and technology is going to play a part in all different parts of the sales funnel. I'm going to talk about that in a second. One big one is that sales technology and methodology have to be integrated. Technology for the sake of technology is not going to get it done for you. You need to do both. And I'll give you a quick example before we dig deep into this. Let's do, and Emily's going to talk about prospecting, but let's just talk about email prospecting. You're going to get this type of result. If you use video-based, right, a video-based message versus a written message, you're going to get this, right, this result. But if you add methodology on top of it, you could get this result. How? Well, if I use Vidyard as an example, Vidyard's great, right? But if you add methodology, whatever you're using for methodology, on top of that, and you know when to send the Vidyard, what to say in the Vidyard, the call to action that you're doing, your results from written to video to methodology with video is way up here. You're leveraging it. Most sales leaders tell me, hey, I've bought a ton of sales technology. I see no results in the productivity of my team. Okay, of course. Technology for the sake of technology, you're not leveraging what you've invested in developing your people, and you're not leveraging your technology. It's a problem, right? So if we go back to what most of most of the executives are saying, is that AI is playing a role in the front of the funnel, the front of the funnel. All right, and that's true, right? And that's where Emily's going to spend her time. It's true. So everyone's using AI for, identifying my prospects and messaging and 30-second commercial and all that stuff in front. But AI is so much more, right? It's just accelerating. We're using AI in the middle of the funnel. We're using AI to dissect individual deals so you can determine the predictability of a close. That's not front of the funnel, right? There's always two things that people tell me is the CROs or entrepreneurs when it comes to funnel. Hey, Dave, very uncomfortable with the amount of deals getting into my thing, and then they're not clean. So we've talked about ChatGPT for a long time, and I'm hoping that you all use it. But what I'm finding it's not muscle memory. So just using the example that I said you could weave it in, you can have AI, right? Using chat, you can say, give me a 30-second commercial. Give me a 30-second commercial or an elevator pitch, right? And I can then say, I'm calling on this persona, this person in this company, this industry. What would be a pain-based 30-second commercial? Bam, it comes out. Now, could I have done it on my own? Yeah. But guess what? This is a good starting point. This is the launching pad for me because now I'm like, wow, that's very cool. So it's there. Use it as a launching pad. Even research. Like I used it all the time for research. I'm researching a person. I'm researching an industry, a company. One of my team members took me on a call. It was about 2 weeks ago. And there's some side chatter over here. And I did some research. And I found they had just gone through this transition. And I had no idea. And so as they're talking, I just kind of I leaned over and talked to the executive. And I said, listen, out of curiosity, how did you handle the transition from this to that? I'm just amazed that you guys did that. Look, what? Like, how did I know that? But then there's this bond, this connection that was awesome. Could that have happened without chat? I'd have to use all my skills. But wow, how nice is it when I feel like I know what's going on in the world? They feel like I know what's going on in the world, right? Because they want to know, do you understand my industry? Do you understand my problem? And do I trust that you can solve it? So that's happening, even in messaging. Now, and Jordan will be talking about this as well. When you integrate, right, technology with the chat, now I can do what? Well, I can now match what my messaging is going to be. My drips are going to be based on where they are in the buyer journey. We kind of talked about that for a minute. So I went in and said, I'd like to, when they're in the decision phase, I can actually write a blog that I don't have to wait for marketing to do. I don't have to wait for anyone to do. I can say, I'd like a 200 word blog that says this from this point of view. And boom, it comes out like, wow, this is awesome. So we all know ChatGPTs exist. Are you using it 3-4 times a day? I checked my averages. I'm on it 7 times a day. It's just become part of my DNA. Is it part of your DNA? So we did a webinar on chat and the prompts that you should use to have laser guided questions so you can get accurate information back. Hey, listen to it, right? It's all right there. Have at it. It's cool. But there's some other stuff that we talked about. If you go back to what I've said about technology working in conjunction with sales, if you really think about that, in the old days, it was sales and marketing, right? Sales and marketing. There's always this friction between sales and marketing. And what that insight said is now technology is there. So now you've got this triangle, right? You've got sales, you've got technology, you've got marketing. They have to work in conjunction because one without the other isn't going to do it. And we talked about that with just making sure that your technology has the right message at the right time based on their buyer journey. But there's other things. Let's talk about the flow of work. And I know this is something that our next presenter, Michael, is going to dig deep on. But when I said it has to be in the flow of work, see, I think that technology is certainly going to play a role. You certainly have to integrate methodology. But the third thing that we talk about is it should be in the flow of work, which means I don't want to go to 16 different places to find info. If I'm in Salesforce or if I'm in HubSpot, if I'm in Microsoft 365, I want to make sure that what I need pops up. I have a higher probability of using it, but I also, as an individual salesperson, create muscle memory because it's right there. I don't have to go and look for something, right? It's super important. Here's a good example of what AI and technology has just leapfrogged where it was 6 months ago in the flow of work. So let's go back to one of the behavioral assessments that most of you have used over some period of time in your career, which is DISC, right? DISC, if you don't know what it is, it tells you that different people have different communication styles. They take in information differently. They're motivated differently. And if you have kids, and I said I have 5, they all are grown up under the same environment, but they're completely different and they communicate differently. So in DISC language, I am a DC, which means 30,000 feet, want to move fast, don't want to talk about your weekend, want to cut to the chase, right? Want to ask a ton of questions. And then the C part, which is analytical, kicks in. D says, yep, got it. And then my C kicks in and says, let me ask you a million questions to make sure, A, I do have it, but B, you're the right choice. So here's the situation. In the flow of work, I'm sitting in CRM and I'm talking to you. You're a potential buyer for me. And up comes the screen, says that you have a different personality type than I do. You may be a social person, right? Well, I know that's not probably one of my strengths. I can do it, but I'm a DC. That's the exact opposite. So it'll pop up and say, David, this person needs to be communicated in this manner. Because remember what I said, salespeople get paid to change the way they communicate. Buyers don't get paid to change the way they buy. And it'll remind me. It's almost like if you watch the NFL or any sport, somebody's got this little microphone in their ear because the coach is talking to them. That's really what's happening based on AI. That coach is right on my screen saying, hey, they're losing engagement. You're losing them. Hey, what you're saying isn't resonating to them. You've got to change your speech pattern because I'm not going to change what I'm saying about my product. I'm changing how I describe my product, right? Because we all know we connect with some people very quickly and others. I will naturally connect with 25% of the population. I don't get a lot of points for selling that group. The tough part is the other 75% of the population that I have to adjust to. So AI has allowed us to do this. It gives us guardrails. I thought that was so cool. Now, take it one step further. And again, Michael will dig deep into this. If I send you as a potential prospect and I'm a seller, I send you an email or a follow-up, right? Well, 2 things actually happen. One, as I said before, when I'm talking, I get, let's say, assume as just an average salesperson, once I start going, I'm emotionally involved. I will kick back to DC. The red light comes on. Hey, you got to switch your talk pattern. When I write from the world that I see, right? So as a DC, I'm writing in bullet form. You may interpret it, if that's not your personality type, is, wow, cold fish. So again, 25% of the population like it. The other ones are like, wow. So guess what? The AI tools now will say what you wrote is not appropriate for that buyer. It's match. It rewrites my text. It rewrites my email. When did that happen? That is awesome. So there's no, I guess there's no end in sight about how technology and AI is going to help us communicate. But is that in front of the funnel? Yeah, it's in front of the funnel if I'm using it as a prospecting tool. But this is in every interaction. If you're an advocate and I want to upsell and cross-sell, or if you're in the qualification phase, this happens across the line. Again, Michael will be digging deeper into this. Here's a topic, another insight that Chris, at the end of the day, will dig deep into. Is from a management perspective. Look, strong sales management will give you a competitive edge, and it's going to play a pivotal role in developing tomorrow's seller. I started off by saying the complex landscape is going to cause a different type of seller to emerge, and you have to assess, you have to do those things. But I believe sales management is the toughest job in any organization. They are in charge of generating revenue. So people like myself, the CEOs, can make good decisions, right? But here's the challenge. As a sales leader, my first challenge is I don't have a lot of training. I probably was a good salesperson. I was promoted into management. And here's what senior leadership said to me. David, you can really sell. I want you to take those 10 people over there, and I want them to think like you, speak like you, sell like you, and get the same productivity as you. Go get them. Okay, now it's called onboarding, right? Now I know I'm exaggerating. That's not probably true in your company, but I can tell you most of us didn't go through 6 months of onboarding to become a good sales manager. So that's my first challenge. My second challenge is that I am managing people with different personality types, different experiences, different skill levels. And so that makes it so much harder. Time is not my friend as a sales leader. It's not my friend because I don't have the time. And when I have time, I'm not really sure what I should be doing. Technology has changed everything. It's going to change the way we sell, and it's changing the way we manage. Look at some of the subsets here of this insight. One is, hey, management reinforcement creates adoption. I don't care if you've rolled out technology, anything that you've rolled out to your organization, if sales leaders are not reinforcing that, not using, let's say, that technology every single day, it will not be adopted. Or if it will, it's going to take years versus months. It's the Achilles heel of every rollout. Is our sales leaders reinforcing it? Are they reinforcing it? Is that what's happening? So that's one. The second one is AI tools. We're talking, the whole thing is going to be AI, as you know, and Jordan's going to be talking about this. They are going to offer laser guided precision when it comes to sales forecasting. So what does this mean? Well, let's break this up. If you think about deal coaching and forecasting, right? Deal management, those are the two big challenges for sales leaders. Now, most senior leaders will say, I don't have enough in the funnel and I don't trust what's there, right? So, but if I'm deal coaching, what happens? I don't deal coach often enough with you because I've got 10 people, but I'm also coaching to fantasy because you as an individual producer are telling me what you think the problem is, what you think you are in the process, and I'm giving you what I think is next steps. But that's from your perspective. And we all know what one person sees isn't really what the other person sees, unless you have what Sandler calls a clear future commitment. Well, that's a different topic. But so I'm giving you advice on things that may not help you. That's the first thing. When it comes to funnel management, look, here's how we do it. If I have a $10 million quota and salesperson number one comes to me and says, I've got $1 million coming in this month. Okay. Now I look over and I say $1 million, but I know that that particular person has been off on their forecast 30% for the last 6 months. I don't write down $1 million. I write down 700,000, right? Because I'm automatically bumping them down to what their historical results have been. And I do that for all 10 people. And then I take that number and I bang it down again before I tell my senior leader, because I don't want to tell the exact number. I want some cushion myself, right? I want some cushion myself. So this is what happens. I can't call the number. So I work so hard. And by the way, my salespeople are telling me throughout the month that I'm going to hit my number. I'm not going to hit my number, but I don't find out until like the 25th of the month. AI solves everything. I have an MRI on every single deal that's in my funnel. Here's what it's done, right? It says, ask these 7 major topics. Now, underneath these, there's 5 questions. So it's like 35 in total. But what technology has allowed us to do is says, as you gather more information, because they're weighted differently, the predictability, the probability of close is this. You are here, get those 2 answers, you are here. Are you kidding me? I didn't believe it, right? I didn't believe it. So I can tell you for several months, we had 3 columns on our forecast. What the salesperson said, what our sales leader said, and what technology said. And guess what? Technology historically is right on target, but we didn't want to believe it. It's kind of like directions in GPS. You know, GPS is saying go this way, and I'm saying I know better. Okay, I'm no better. And I went this way, right? So I didn't get off the exit like they told me to. I stayed in. It was great. I thought I was like a winner, a genius for like 4 miles until there's a huge backup and I'm sitting there for 2 hours. And I should have listened. Technology doesn't lie. You have to decide whether A, you can interpret it, but B, are you ready to accept it? So now, what does this do for me? Well, as a senior leader, I hear what you say, but the data tells me that we have some serious gaps. And what that allows me to do is to pinpoint my coaching, my deal coaching on those gaps. It allows me to then be self-sufficient as a salesperson, because I don't have to wait for my manager to do deal coaching. I have my own dashboard sitting right in front of me. I said, look, I need those 4 questions to go from a 45% predictability of close to an 80%. I'm going to go get those. I don't need my manager to tell me those where the holes are. Technology, my GPS is telling me that's the exit. Take the exit. So awesome. I can accelerate my own performance as an individual producer. What else does it do? As leaders, I can coach and train to exactly where this deal needs help, where that person needs help. I get to see the trends. Remember the assessment when you assess individuals? I get to see the trend. As a senior leader, I see the trend for all my managers, but I get to see the trends for my salespeople. We tend to lose deals right there because we're not getting this information. It's so important. But when I have an overall dashboard of everything that's going on, science will help me in this time compression environment where so many things are changing. And as you do more deals with AI, and you know this, AI gets smarter and smarter and smarter. And, all the news is, oh my God, the machines will take over the world. The topic for a different day. But from a sales leader's perspective, it is a breath of fresh air. I can now do my job, right? It's almost like a surgeon. If I had an MRI, I can pinpoint where that issue is versus I have to now do what? Go in and find something. I mean, that is not productive. It's not healthy. It's not healthy to do it the other way for your funnel management either. So AI technology is changing rapidly. It's going to change the way we sell. You're going to hear that now with the other speakers. Again, I'm trying to lay the foundation, the framework for what you're going to hear throughout the day, because they're going to take those general themes and dig deep.
And don't forget, you can join us live in Orlando for the Sandler Summit. We're going to be getting our best trainers and our top clients from around the world together March 19th and 20th in Orlando. Go to sandler.com/summit for more information.